Hello guys. What do you do when the person you were is pronounced dead, but you are forced to keep living in their body? This is a story about the brutal space between who you were and who you must become. The words hung in the sterilized air, colder and sharper than a scalpel that had opened his life. Irreparable. A clean, medical word for a shattered thing. Dr. Aris didn't look at Elias, he looked at the glowing X-ray, a ghostly map of a country Elias could never visit again. The patella, a constellation of fractures. The cartilage, a worn-down road to nowhere. Elias saw his reflection in the dark office window. It was a stranger's face, pale and thin. Behind him, the X-ray shone like a mocking moon. He was a cartographer of pain, and every nerve ending in his right knee was a screaming red line marking a dead end. The doctor was still talking, using gentle phrases like pain management and new normals and realistic expectations. Each word was a shovel of dirt on a coffin. He drove home through the bleeding city lights. Each red taillight was a stop sign for his soul. He had been a runner. It wasn't a hobby, it wasn't something he did. It was the only verb that defined him. He ran from his childhood home in the dusty plains. He ran toward a scholarship. He ran through the grief when his father died. He ran because the rhythmic pounding of his feet on pavement was the only metronome that could quiet the chaos in his head. Now, the music was gone. The silence was absolute. He parked the car and the stillness pressed in, heavy and suffocating. His apartment was a museum to a dead man. Medals hung like funeral wreaths. Racing bibs were tacked to a corkboard, brittle pages from a forgotten history. His running shoes, a dozen pairs, sat by the door like loyal dogs waiting for a master who would never return. He was 32 years old, and his future felt like a phantom limb, an ache for something that was no longer there. His identity had been amputated. Survival meant figuring out how to crawl forward from the stump. The first few months were a descent. Physical therapy with a woman named Cora felt like a sick joke. She was all quiet observation and clipped commands. No sympathy, no gentle encouragement. Just the cold, hard mechanics of flesh and bone. "Bend," she'd say, her fingers pressing into the swollen tissue around his knee until tears welled in his eyes. The pain is a signal. It is not the enemy. It is information. Listen to it. He didn't want to listen. He wanted to scream. He wanted to shatter something. He tried, once. In the pre-dawn gray, he put on his old gear. The familiar compression fabric felt like a lie against his skin. He told himself it would just be a light jog. A few hundred feet. He made it 20 paces before his knee buckled. A wet, grinding pop that sent a bolt of white-hot agony straight to his brain. He collapsed on the wet sidewalk, the rough concrete scraping his palms. He didn't cry out. The humiliation was too deep for sound. He just lay there, the morning traffic beginning to hum around him, a man drowning on dry land. That failure sent him spiraling. He stopped going to see Cora. What was the point? She was trying to teach a fish how to climb a tree. He embraced the abyss. The world inside his apartment shrank to the distance between the couch and the refrigerator. He watched old race footage, the fluid motion of his past self a form of exquisite torture. His friends called. They offered empty platitudes. "You're more than just a runner, man. Were you?" He didn't feel like more. He felt like less. He felt like nothing. One night, sunk deep into the couch cushions and the bottom of a whiskey bottle, he stumbled upon a documentary. It wasn't about sleek professional runners. It was about a race in the desert, men and women with sun-cracked skin and haunted eyes, pushing themselves through 100 miles of heat and sand. He watched a woman at an aid station, her body convulsing, her face a mask of dried salt and despair. The medic was telling her to stop. She was at her limit. She looked into the camera, and there was no hope in her eyes. There was no inspiration, there was just a terrible, barren resolve. "It's supposed to hurt," she whispered, her voice a rasp. "It's the whole point." She got up and stumbled back into the darkness. Something inside Elias cracked. He wasn't watching a display of physical prowess, he was watching a spiritual war. She wasn't running from the pain. She was running toward a truth that could only be found inside of it. Her pain had purpose. His was just a dead weight. He went back to Cora's clinic the next day. He looked gaunt, smelled of stale liquor, but his eyes were different. She watched him walk in, his limp more pronounced than ever. She said nothing, just waited. "You're wrong," he said, his voice raw. Cora raised an eyebrow. "About what, Elias?" "You told me to listen to the pain. I haven't been. I've just been letting it talk. I want you to teach me how to have a conversation with it." He paused, the words costing him everything. "I'm not a runner anymore." "I accept that, but I am not finished. I want to enter the Bayview Marathon in 10 months. Cora's face was unreadable. She walked over to her anatomical charts. "The marathon is 42 kilometers. Your knee, in its current state, will not survive 5. Your goal is irrational." "Then we don't train my knee," Elias said, a flicker of that desert resolve in his voice. "We train everything else. We build a new machine around the broken part. A scaffold of muscle and sinew so strong that the knee just has to come along for the ride. I don't need to be fast. I don't need to be graceful. I just need to endure." Cora stared at him for a long, silent moment. She saw past the desperate bravado. She saw the shift. He was no longer a man mourning a loss. He was a man preparing for a war. She nodded once. The pain will be your teacher. I will simply be the translator. This will cost you. Not money. It will cost you the man you used to be. You will have to kill him every single day. The next 10 months were a journey through fire. It was not a montage of triumphant music and sweat. It was the monotonous reality of the grind. It was hours on the floor doing excruciating glute bridges, his body trembling. It was the mind-numbing repetition of core exercises until his abs felt like they were tearing from the bone. It was Cora's relentless voice cutting through his fatigue. Your form is failing. The load is shifting to your patella. Stop, reset. Do it right or do not do it at all. There were so many failures. Days the inflammation was so bad he could barely get out of bed, the depression a thick fog. Days he saw runners glide past his window and the old bitterness would rise like bile. He had a recurring dream where he was standing at a starting line, and when the gun went off, his leg turned to sand. He would wake up with a silent scream caught in his throat. Cora never offered comfort. She offered data. The swelling is up 15%. What did you eat yesterday? How many hours did you sleep? Analyze the variables. The pain is not random. It is a response. Understand the response. She forced him to become a scientist of his own suffering. He logged every meal, every exercise, every flicker of pain in a journal. He was not training for a race. He was training to control a cascade of failures within his own body. He sacrificed the runner's ego, the obsession with speed and distance. He replaced it with the engineer's obsession with structure and integrity. The day of the marathon was cold and gray. Elias stood at the very back of the starting corral, a ghost among thousands of vibrant, healthy bodies. He wore a simple black brace over his knee, a visible admission of his weakness. He wasn't here to compete. He was here to finish a conversation he'd started with himself a year ago. The gun went off. The herd surged forward. He waited. He let them go. He started with a slow, deliberate shuffle, more of a controlled fall than a run. The first 10 miles were a study in mechanics, foot strike, hip alignment, core engaged. He wasn't running. He was managing a complex, fragile system. The pain began its real ascent around mile 16, a familiar, deep, grinding ache. He didn't fight it. He acknowledged it. He acknowledged it. Hello, old friend. I know you're there. He adjusted his stride, shifting the load. He focused on Cora's voice in his head. Analyze. Adapt. At mile 22, the wall arrived. It wasn't a wall, it was a cliff. The pain was no longer information. It was a roaring static that consumed everything. His vision narrowed. Every step was a fresh agony, a white-hot spike driving into his joint. Stopping was the only logical thing to do. An aid station shimmered ahead like a mirage. He could stop. He could quit, and no one would blame him. They would see the brace and know. They would offer him pity and a ride to the finish. He saw the man in the doctor's office window. He saw the empty face on the couch. That man was waiting for him at the aid station, offering him a seat. Elias looked at that phantom, at that ghost of his despair, and he made a choice. He ran past the aid station. It wasn't a run anymore. It was a grotesque, lurching limp. He was a broken machine spewing smoke, but it was still moving forward. People were staring now. He could hear a woman in the crowd say, "Oh, that poor man, he should stop." He hated her for it. Then he thanked her for it. Her pity was a fuel. He wasn't poor, he was rich. He was buying back his soul with every agonizing step. The finish line wasn't a triumphant destination. It was just a place to stop falling. He stumbled across it and a volunteer caught him as his legs gave out completely. He didn't raise his arms. He hung his head and wept, not tears of joy, tears of exorcism. He was crying for the man he had been, for the pain it took to let him go, for the terrifying, uncertain freedom of what came next. Cora was there. She didn't smile. She didn't congratulate him. She looked at his knee, then at his tear-streaked, sweat-caked face. She gave him a single, sharp nod. It wasn't praise. It was acknowledgement, a shared understanding of the brutal truth. He had lost the race. He had lost his former self. He had lost the ability to ever move through the world without a quiet negotiation with pain. But as he sat there on the cold asphalt, he realized what he had gained. It wasn't a medal. It was the unbreakable knowledge that he was the architect of his own foundation. The victory wasn't crossing the line. It was the decision, back at mile 22, to stop running from the pain and finally learn how to carry it. The scar is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of your strength. Your true power is not found in avoiding the break, but in what you choose to build around it. Like, share, and subscribe if this story hits something real. And visit my YouTube channel to watch more interesting motivational, thriller, and fictional stories.